Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. This is the High Caliber Man podcast with Hugh Mayers, and this week I'm joined by my guest Sereena Al Noor. Good afternoon, Sereena. How you doing?
Afternoon, Hugh. How are you, my darling?
I'm absolutely excellent, excellent, and looking forward
Good.
to this conversation that we try to organize. But everything happens in the time that it's supposed to. So
Yes, of
good that
course.
you could be here, and I appreciate your time. And talking about time, to make the best use of time, I want to just introduce you to the people that watch the platform by finding out about your book, because I know that you're an author and a therapist. So I kind of got a two-in-one kind of intro question. What sort of therapist are you in terms of your practice, and what is the books or dissertations that you've written? What is your work about?
So, first of all, I am an author, a filmmaker. I have a documentary, and I'm a singer as well,
Okay.
and a coach, stroke counselor. I'd say there's a sprinkle of spiritual counseling there as well, which is tailored to, um, my clients' beliefs and things like that. So, my counseling practice is called Pure, which stands for People Under Radical Empowerment.
Like the acronym. Okay.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. And my books were birthed out of my own stories. However, one of them is a therapy session, a coaching session between myself and one of my clients. And it was the first time I counseled stroke coached someone of that caliber and someone that open. So I decided to diary what he said and asked his permission to record our conversations and
Sure.
turned it into a book, which is interesting, and I'll get to that. So my first book is How to Build a Business with £1 in a Day. And the reason why I built that is because I was living in Spain at the time and my son was still at my house in England. And we were talking about things that he should do, to be more work towards self-employment, et cetera, et cetera. And he was talking about,
Mhm.
how expensive it is to run a business. So I was kind of, coaching him and saying, look, if we rein it in and start trying to make it look professional before it's professional, just take all the bouge out and, for example, have a Gmail account for your business email address just for now until
Yeah,
you get to
yeah,
a
yeah.
point where you're making a profit. And then you can start investing in those types of things freely,
So
as
steps,
we go
so basically
along.
step by
Yeah,
step, building steps. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So that's how to build a business for £1 in a day. And so I recorded, I wrote down step by step what I did for my son.
Okay, okay.
And then my second book is called Soft Girl Era. And that's about femininity and empowerment and self-expression. So soft girl era is not necessarily about financial gain for me. It's
Hmm.
more about having being independent with your autonomy and
Hmm.
being soft with that.
Okay, okay.
My third book is called Unorthodox Masculinity, and that is the book that came out of the coaching session that I was having with that particular client that I explained before.
Sure.
So it's Unorthodox Masculinity, Conversations with a Goddess. And it's really
It's an interesting title.
interesting.
A
Yes,
very
because,
interesting title.
and the reason why I called it unorthodox is because I think society pushes men to see themselves through the male gaze, through patriarchy, which I call the male gaze. Um, and that then can become a barrier in terms of how fluid they can be about their self expression to go on a journey of personal development. So I just think that what I learned from that book is that, men need to strip away a lot of the patriarchal mindsets and thought processes and beliefs that's been pushed on them in order to explore themselves, in order to mature and self actualize. And then I have another book called Project Saturn, which is how to help practitioners and families deal with mental health crisis. So rather than how to help people with mental health issues, I've written the book from a different perspective, which is how people who are dealing with people with mental health, how they can support that person. So how can they de-escalate, rather than escalate? And I'll give you an example. I talk about mirroring, where when somebody is having a crisis, sometimes we take offense in terms of what they're saying and stuff. A lot of my clients, when I've worked in professional sectors, helping people with mental health and, working in that field in terms of prisons and consulting, one of the things that I noticed from speaking to the mental health patients and people who have difficulties is that their families take offense to what they say or do when they're in a crisis.
Mhm.
So I thought it would be interesting to highlight for the families that, how they can be objective in those scenarios, which supports the escalation.
It's good that you wrote that book, or should I say, from that perspective, because there isn't always that amount of literature and research and information out there. But when people are going through poor mental health, when they have diagnoses, when they're struggling, families do feel it. That they do feel it on
Right,
different levels. They feel it on a level of, feeling disempowered and unable to help that loved one. And from the other
right,
side is where they might take things personally. There's the potential for wear and tear, right?
right,
And burnout because, while their family members suffering, they also, along with them, suffer in their own kind of way. And
right.
depending on the nature of the relationships, you can fracture relationships. So that's a pretty cool angle. That's a pretty cool angle.
I've
But
got one
you,
more book
oh
that's
God, you got more.
available.
Okay, there's more. There's more. Let's go. Let's go. And
So
where can
those
we
are
find
all
these books? Are they on Amazon? Are
Amazon.
they?
Yeah, just type
Okay,
Sereena Elmore in
cool,
the
cool.
search engine,
Hmm.
and you'll see my books there. Um, so I've got one more book that I've just written that's about to be published. I'm just tidying it up at the moment, and it's called The Silent Killer: How Gluten, Toxins, and Metals Slowly Kill You Before 40. And the book is basically
This is about
me.
gut health, right? This is gut health. Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's me taking you on a journey of realizing that how important gut health is, how I was becoming ill, and how I have healed myself and
Mm-hmm.
how I maintain myself after that.
Okay, because
That,
I've got to understand that there's a lot of inflammation that people experience related to processed foods. Some of the stuff that all these different numbers, E numbers, and different additives that we're not so sure when you're not eating pure food or
well, the
whole
main
food.
ones,
There's
yeah, the
a lot of
main,
people have gluten intolerance. If they're not allergic, but there's a kind of intolerance which is a little bit different from an allergy, but it still means that
I
it's
think
not
what
for you.
I think that we are all gluten intolerant. It's just a matter of time before it actually starts to show up as a real issue.
Hmm.
How the how it works is in your small intestines, you've got something called villi. And when you eat, the vitamins and minerals go into the villi and then enter into your bloodstream. However, when you eat gluten products, the gluten doesn't digest in your system, it sticks to your villi. So therefore, if you've got things stuck to your villi, which is supposed to act as an absorbent for the good stuff, the good stuff can't come through.
Mm.
So then the gluten starts to mold, the food starts to mold, everything just starts to mold. And then you have got mold wanting to feed off sugar, um, and you're going to crave more processed stuff.
Hmm. So you almost like you've got
Uh,
food fermenting in your stomach then.
yeah,
Okay,
And
okay.
by the time you're 40, this is my theory, that's when it starts to show up.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I hear that. Health is wealth, and food is definitely our food is related to our status, our state of mind as well, or can be in a big way, right? There's a sort of chicken and egg, depending on how our state of mind is and our mental health. How do we approach food and our relationship with food? But also the other side of if you got gluten intolerance or you're eating food that's not digesting or that's not working for you, then that can affect your, there's a link between like food and mood because of the
Right.
chemicals in the food as
My
well. So
colonic
yeah.
irrigation practitioner taught me that our there's a nerve that goes from your stomach to your um
But reptilian
back,
brain, but
yeah,
brainstem,
the back
brainstem.
brain here. Can't even remember what it's called now, but here anyway.
Mhm.
And when your stomach is, it causes a block basically. So if you are contaminated with gluten, starches, and metals and toxins and mold and all that kind of stuff, it blocks your stomach from communicating with your brain, and it causes a lot of brain distortion.
So
So a
like
lot of
fog,
people's
like a
mental
fog.
health
People talk about
issues,
fog, like mental fog, right? Because of
yeah,
the
brain
food.
fog.
Yeah,
I
brain
remember
fog.
when
That's
I
the word I'm
had,
looking for.
yeah, I had two colonics this year because of I was healing myself.
Hmm.
And the second one, I literally felt the back of my brain like something happening, like literally something happening. And within the first week, the amount of clarity I had was amazing, absolutely amazing. That is no exaggeration. I mean, I know a
Hmm.
lot of us are scared about having certain tools, placed in certain parts of our bodies. However,
Hmm.
the results is amazing, absolutely amazing. And I'm not just trying to sell colonics. I just think that everybody needs one.
No, people are in the Western world full of it. They say in it like metaphorically speaking, but maybe literally as well, right? There's
Well, me
a
and my health group, we've actually decided that in the West, we eat like Vikings,
meaning.
milk, milk and bread and
Okay,
meat.
okay, okay. Yeah, yeah. There's a whole science behind that, and I'm hoping that we can maybe at another juncture speak about that in detail because I think that's a show in and of itself.
Yeah.
But what I was hoping for today is if you could speak a little bit about share your views and ideas related to relationships post sort of traumatic slave syndrome or post colonized peoples, post slave populations, like how do those histories impact like culture, attitudes, and then romantic relationships, etc., marriage.
But it's a bit, that's a lot.
That's a
That that
lot. So there's no
that is a
pressure,
lot.
but
I've
maybe
got
we
a
could.
documentary as well on
Uh-huh.
Amazon, and it's called Silenced, where I done extensive research on the reasons why Black women don't seek justice for crimes committed against them. And when I say Black women, I mean our tribe,
Hmm.
as in the Caribbean tribe,
Yeah.
because of recent, we've realized that we're not actually African to the Africans. So um, I
That's
have.
another documentary again. These are all subjects in and of themselves.
So yeah, a lot of our work is we're starting to, see ourselves within that BAME banner and
Hmm.
separate ourselves and deal with ourselves separately. So yeah, I've done two roundtable discussions, one with survivors and practitioners from Birmingham, and one with survivors and practitioners from London.
Hmm.
And I have keynote speakers like Jude Kelly and Ava Carrier Denzi, and also a police constable. And the head of the UK Says No, Lindsay Dear Love, is also in there. And it's a good watch. It's got 5 stars on there. It came out in 2021, and a lot of
Where
colleges
will
and
we find that? Where will we
universities.
find that?
Amazon Prime
Amazon
Video.
Prime. Excellent. Good
Yeah,
stuff. Good stuff.
yeah. So that's that in terms of, starting the discussion on um slavery. Now, like I said, it's a bit difficult to start where to start. So I'll start by saying,
I was gonna ask you then. Let me ask you this. Let me ask you
go
more. Let
on.
me name that because I put a big,
Yeah,
a bit
you
of a
did.
big statement, right? But if I want to
Which
narrow it
sticks
down
in
to
your
say
list.
that, all right, this particular group right? This demographic, African Caribbean, yeah, have been through, there's a unique kind of history or histories for the people from the different islands, but there's striking similarities. So I see that as like one culture, although there's various islands. There's a kind of
Yeah,
even if it
they were
can,
still
like the
countries.
United States of the Caribbean, like you got the United
Yeah,
States of them, right? So it's, I mean, each state has got its own uniqueness, but there's a lot of similarity. So I'll say one people, right?
right.
But within that, I'm talking about there seems to have been over the generations since coming to the UK, different dynamics that has seemed to affect that seems to have affected the way that people meet, couple, have certain type of relationships, reproduce family, because family is everything. So
I
if
think
you
that okay, so I hear what you're saying now. So we are living our grandparents' dream. You know, they wanted to get a better life for their family in Jamaica and have a better life for themselves for their in the Caribbean. So they came over here and they worked and they had their way of living. They had a system, they had husbands, they had wives, they ended up having their children, bringing their children over. They had a better future in their mind,
Mhm.
meaning they were over here suffering, but there was something that they were aiming for. However, I don't think that got passed on to the next generations effectively because that got interrupted by Rastafarianism,
Mhm.
which then meant that the families were not being supported by their children to support them with their dream, which should have been their children's dream as well. So the children then were living a new reality, uh, and they had a new struggle and a different struggle because they're now in England, they're now in the West, where they're being attacked for being black,
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
and don't really have a definite perception of who they are in their parents' countries. So then they're becoming,
Oh, like
uh,
you mean a fracture because of the distance? So if you were
yeah,
born in Trinidad, you were born in Jamaica, you were born in Antigua, or whatever, you come to England, you have a relatively fixed identity, especially if you've served, you had your
right.
formative years there. You come to the UK as an adult. But when you have children in the UK, uh,
You then become like the
you have
mixed culture
yeah, you
people,
have a bit of a
like the
split
mixed race
identity.
people.
Because
Yeah, you've got a split
I know as a
identity.
child, people would have said, when I was a child, people would have said that black kid or that West Indian kid. But when I went to the Caribbean, when I went to Guyana or when I went to Jamaica, like at 4 and 6, people would say, oh, there's an English kid. So it's kind of like,
Right,
okay, all right,
right. So it's just like
I
being
know
you've
they
got a
don't mean
mixed
I'm
race
white, but
person.
they're saying you weren't
Right,
born here and you're slightly different. You talk a little bit weird to
right,
us and you're moving a little bit different. You're cool, you're family, but you're my English
right.
family. You know what I mean? So yeah,
Yes.
all right, let me
So
pick up
it's
you.
like a mixed race person, for example, you know, they're neither black or white, are they?
Split identity, yeah,
Yeah. So
identity,
then,
yeah, yeah.
even though we're black, we still have the same kind of issue. So
Hmm.
then we have the grandparents' religion that then involves Christianity. So
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
practical reasons to get married are no longer because their children are running away from their religion and their
Okay.
culture because now they have to go on their own personal journey to self actualize because they can't see themselves in their home and they can't see themselves in the in the country that they're in. So now they have to
Hmm.
form their own identity.
So
So
you're saying
then,
in that forming of that identity, there's a moving away from my marriage, but that was part because people were still having babies, they're still meeting.
but
Um,
but
Whatever
we
the
could argue
religion,
that
whatever the
though,
political philosophy, black people are gonna meet up and be attracted and gonna couple up. It's gonna happen. It's just nature.
yes. However, we could argue that a lot of those relations, the children were consequences of sex, not consequences of an actual plan.
Okay.
There's a difference. So without identity, how are you making definite decisions about your life and your journey and your plan?
So a lack of
you know?
intentionality then, a lack of intentionality then you're saying like people are just they're going through, just living like
Yeah,
living life.
living life and trying to find safe spaces to find out who they are.
Hmm.
How are you supposed to, know what job you want if you haven't explored jobs? How are you supposed to know what car you want to drive if you haven't test drive them? You can't make a definite decision because you don't know who you are to decide what type of relationship you actually want to be in. However, our natural instincts, we still want to have sex. We still want to enjoy intimacy. So we're still going to do that. But like you said, without self-awareness.
Hmm.
So again, then we come back to another generation down again now. So now we're not even the Windrush anymore. We are now Black British English people who are
Hmm.
Black.
Hmm. And how
So
is that showing up in the, what's the impact of that dynamic? This moving away from the Windrush as this Windrush season, funny enough, but what's the impact of that in terms of these romantic relationships or what would have been marriages or should have been marriages like, or could have been marriages? What's going on? Because again, like I'm saying, or like you agree, people are
I
still
lost it.
meeting, people still need to, people are loving and needing to be loved, or,
Yeah.
you know,
Again, the things that make up a family structure or a strong relationship no longer exist. People are not embracing religion that promotes that is a part of your lifestyle. It's not a
hmm
flex to get married,
hmm
you know? Like I said, in other religions like Islam, for example, it's a flex to get married. It's a part of your deen. In Christianity, it's the same
hmm
thing.
100,
However, most people don't have a base that requires them to
hmm
commit to a relationship. So therefore, I feel as though we are in a void where certain age groups may not even be able to experience being in a solid loving relationship because society hasn't defined what relationships are and what they look like outside of religious concepts.
hmm hmm hmm
So therefore, once that is refined and determined, the generations below will then be able to define based on what they want to commit to relationships, so a new structure or a new purpose, a new reason to bond in that way has to be manifested.
I was gonna say that it sounds as if as time's gone on, it becomes more ambiguous because when you speak about marriage, whatever, whether it's from a religious template or even just from a cultural template, it's there's a level of presumptions and assumptions that people will make about these people, these two people that are married or these two people that intend to get married, or whereas when you just say relationship, it sounds like, well, what's the yeah, what does that mean? Are they serious? Or is it a one? Yeah, is it friends with Bennett? What is this thing? Like it becomes
I just
ambiguous,
think
right?
that have lost, people don't want to be seen no more, you know? And to be in a relationship means you have to be seen, means you have to be told about yourself, both women and men, means you have to be loved, means you have to have somewhere to go back to.
Okay,
And a lot of
okay.
people these days are so insecure because of their lack of identity that they couldn't even imagine being seen in the ways that you have to be seen in a relationship dynamics. So there's a lot of stigma that has been created around the concept of relationships and marriage that needs to be unpacked.
Hmm. Hmm.
People have seen a lot of people take relationships for a joke. A lot of people have been violated whilst they trusted somebody.
Hmm.
I myself have been in a relationship and, you know, um, a marriage, and joint incomes and joint this and joint that. And then it's got that whole concept has got fumbled based off a man being a man. apparently.
Mhm.
So then now as women, when we've experienced those things, we're like, okay, so you're doing that because you're a man, fine. But I've still got to think about how that, where that places me, because now
Sure,
I've got to start
sure.
from scratch. It's not even
Mm.
about being offended about the fact that you've done what you wanted to do, because like you said, you're a man. However, how does that, where does that leave me? What does that do? So then we have a situation where you have the archetype of the rich white woman manifested in Black women, and be very focused on the fact that I said archetype.
I locked into that word immediately. That's a very
So
symbolic. You're talking symbolisms now. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yes, it's a persona. Because of the fact that men will be men, Black women have now had to find navigate life through independence in order to protect themselves from men being men, not protect themselves from men, but protect themselves from men being men.
What does that men being men mean? I don't understand. Is that I don't know if that's good, bad, or indifferent, but I'm intrigued. What does it mean?
It's neither. It's just a man being a man. So, for example, what a man will sacrifice his family and his livelihood just to have sex with somebody else.
Hmm.
That's a big one, to be honest. Uh, a
So
woman can
that sounded
become,
like a man out of integrity.
well, we can call it what we want to call it, the consequences of it. The root is neither here or there. It comes from a lot of things.
Hmm.
Um, but ultimately, it can leave a woman in a position where she's now destabilized because she is now a single mother with children who
Hmm.
has to now look after those children. That doesn't necessarily fall on the man. And I'm not saying women are perfect. However, you have the Windrush that realize that men can be men, and the consequences of that living in the West, which then led them to teach us to find our independence and don't depend on a man. Not to not love a man, but don't
Hmm.
depend on a man. Find your independence.
Hmm.
So then we have developed ways and where we can still afford to take our children to private school, for example, or homeschool. And then you have the situation where men need to feel needed. So then that has a block in terms of how he places himself within the relationship dynamics, because you have the balance or the imbalance of him needing to feel needed and her not necessarily needing anyone because of the consequences of him potentially forfeiting his role for what a woman would consider minor needs.
Hmm. So is this something that's can I answer just in a context? Is this something that is right now, or is this are you talking maybe like generation of the 80s? Where are we now if we was looking at us on a timeline? These this sort of
No,
ideological
we're fully activated now.
we're
We're
activated.
fully,
This is it now.
yeah,
This is we're in this moment from your
we're going on
perspective.
holiday
Uh-huh.
on the weekend. We have very good friendships where we're not lonely. Um, we're able to afford ourselves and our ambitions and our lifestyles, regardless what that looks like. So, it doesn't necessarily mean driving a Porsche. It could just mean being able to catch the bus without having to depend on a man. And in
Hmm.
the past, when you look at the rich white woman, she had to navigate that situation through a husband. And through the feminist movement, they have taken themselves out of the navigating that through their husbands. And now they've also become, like you would say, the rich white woman mentality.
Hmm.
So, what Black women have had to do that ourselves, we've never been able to navigate our lifestyle and self actualization through our husbands. So, we're eating fresh, we're writing books, we're making documentaries, we're consulting with the House of Commons, we're getting
Wait, whoa, whoa, whoa. We that sounded very. across the board. Is that you saying that that's just for clarity? Is that common
Um,
in Black Britain amongst the women, or you saying there's a certain class of women or a specific, not elite, but or group, or it could be just that's the norm. That's actually normal.
well, if you look around, Black women do and will enter certain spaces as and when needed, depending on what's going on. And a lot of Black women are doing a lot of amazing things. And I think you're right to even state that, ask that question because it goes to show what men notice and how we are seen. I
Yeah,
think
no,
there's a
no, I had to ask that because I've been made aware that there is a big move into higher education with, say, for example, Black women in this country, America as well, probably more in America, but also in the UK, this thing about women going into Black women going into higher education and the professions. But then there's also a side of the Black community that we talk about poverty and instability and housing and single motherhood and different things, and it has a different connotation. So I'm just wondering if there's a class component to that. So two things can be true at the same time. There can be women
I
from
think
a,
hierarchy manifests itself through different situations. And obviously, there's going to be Black women who are more able to cope with life and have more confidence and self esteem to enter certain spaces. And there's certain Black women that are not necessarily able to do that. However,
Mhm,
I don't think becoming a single mom or even being poor affects our ability to, take a stand or enter certain spaces when we need to. I know I have, worked with people who you wouldn't necessarily class as being in the salary bracket. They're on universal credit, but
mhm.
I've seen them do some amazing things in the communities.
Excellent, excellent.
And I think that being in the West, we have to be real about how well we're able to navigate this system and have our achievements assigned to our salaries and job roles. Because as Black people, it's difficult because the system is still very old in the UK. It's still very much about colonization. You can
Mhm,
have a person, Black or male or female Black, and go into an establishment and they will still expect you to overperform as though you're in master's house. So you can have a Black woman who is more than capable of writing policies and constitution. However, she has to get a normal job because she's Black and she's unable to be in those spaces in a secure way where she can build her pension and wealth around that. So
mhm, mhm.
we have to look at this within its within radical truth.
So what is the context of that in relationships? So you give him, I'm getting a woman's where Black women are. So I'm trying to understand, are they is marriage dead or is
No,
heteronormative
I think
relationships
that
dead or
there's a modern
like,
woman that's manifested.
and who is
Again,
she by herself? Is she in
she's
relationship?
capable of being in relationships. However, men have to do what they have to do. They have to realize that there's a modern woman that's manifested. There's a modern woman that has actualized in society, and the men need to, do what they need to do that's necessary to now be with these women.
So gentlemen that are watching this, they've been forewarned that they need to.
Yeah. So
According to your school of thought, I'm not
yeah,
saying I necessarily agree or disagree. I don't have to have, what do you
no,
say?
that's fine,
I don't have
and
to
it's
have a
not
horse.
definite.
I don't have to have a horse in the race.
Yeah.
Uh, but from what you're saying, if I understand you correctly, that, well, black men will need orders, or no, I shouldn't say black men. There's a class of black men that will need to step up because maybe there's some that stepped up already. I don't want to make the presumption that
Yeah, exactly. And
all the brothers need to
we're
get in
not
gear.
saying that it's
Yeah.
all. We're
Yeah.
not saying all, but we're just saying that there's a problem
Absolutely.
and it needs to be addressed. So, for example, you know, I have clients and I'm very much in the community in Birmingham and in London, actually. And when I'm talking to guys about relationships, I will say to them, where do you go to meet certain types of women, these good women that you are wanting to attract?
Hmm.
And they don't have an answer. Now, I say, okay, so where did you used to go and look for women in your teens? So they would say, obviously, the women are not going to be there anymore. So it would be, for example, on the ramp in Birmingham by the McDonald's. Everybody used to kind of hang out there,
Hmm.
or at the community centre, or at parties. You know, in my mom's age group, I guess it was at parties at the bingy houses and all that kind of stuff because they were forced to be more isolated from society. So things have evolved, and women are in different spaces. With the types of women that guys want are in different spaces. So, you know, she might be in the yoga class. She might be taking a weekend trip to Brazil. I mean, Brussels. She might be in a forum talking about, policy around knife crime and the youth. She
Hmm.
might be at a yoga class. She might be in Waitrose
Hmm.
getting her sauerkraut and her
Okay, okay.
kimchi for her gut health. She might be at the hairdressers. You understand what I'm saying to you? So it's a
I
case of,
do. I do. I
it's a,
do.
right. So,
I just want to,
as
I want to
men,
say that, what I want to say is that
go on.
I, only because of time, I want us to take a pause there because I want to give the viewers a time to reflect. But can I invite you for a part two, if that will be possible? If I can get your time to go a little bit deeper into this perspective, because I'm absolutely fascinated and I'm gripped, but only
Oh,
because of
that's
time.
so good. I love that.
If it's only because it feels like a Batman episode where just as we got to the cliffhanger, we'll
Yeah.
pause it there till we
Okay.
speak again. But
Okay.
thank you so much for your time. The ending might be abrupt, but there's a science behind it, there's a purpose for it. But till we speak again, thank you so much,
No
Serena. Thank
problem.
you for
Thank
your
you for having me
contribution.
here.
Cheers. Till next time. Bye bye.